The air in the Moretti family estate was thick with cigar smoke and the weight of unspoken accusations. Don Antonio Moretti, the iron-fisted patriarch of one of New York's most feared crime families, lay sprawled across his mahogany desk, a single bullet hole in his temple. Blood pooled beneath his head, staining the ledger he'd been scribbling in moments before his death. The room was silent now, save for the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum swinging like a metronome counting down to chaos. Vittorio Moretti stood in the doorway, his sharp gray eyes scanning the scene. At 32, he was the Don's eldest son and heir apparent, groomed since childhood to take the reins of the family empire. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his clenched fists betrayed the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. Around him, the family gathered like vultures circling a fresh kill. His younger brother Luca, smirking faintly. His sister Isabella, pale and trembling. His uncle Marco, wiping sweat from his brow, and a dozen capos and cousins, their loyalty as uncertain as the shifting winds. Who found him? Vittorio's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I did, said Isabella, her voice barely above a whisper. She clutched a rosary, her knuckles white. I came to bring him his coffee, and he was just gone. Vittorio stepped closer to the body, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. The Don's revolver lay on the floor, just out of reach of his lifeless hand. A suicide? Unlikely. Antonio Moretti was a man who faced death with a sneer, not a coward who'd turn a gun on himself. No, this was murder, cold, calculated, and close. Someone in this room had pulled the trigger, or at least knew who did. Lock the doors, Vittorio ordered, turning to his right-hand man, Enzo, a hulking figure with a scar running down his cheek. No one leaves until we figure this out. Enzo nodded and moved to secure the exits, while murmurs rippled through the crowd. Luca stepped forward, his dark hair slicked back, a cigarette dangling from his lips. You're awfully quick to take charge. Vic Dad's not even cold yet, and you're playing king. Vittorio's jaw tightened. Luca had always been a thorn in his side, charming, reckless, and ambitious enough to challenge him at every turn. Someone has to, he replied coolly, unless you'd rather let the feds or the Russians waltz in and pick us apart. Luca chuckled, exhaling smoke. Maybe they already have. Ever think this wasn't one of us? The room buzzed with unease. The Moretti family had enemies, rival families like the Petrovs, crooked cops, even a few turncoats who'd flipped to the feds. But a hit this clean inside the fortified estate suggested an inside job. Vittorio's mind raced. The Don had been paranoid in his final months, ranting about betrayal, tightening security, and rewriting his will. Had he seen this coming? Enough speculation, Uncle Marco barked, his gravelly voice silencing the chatter. We need to call a meeting, figure out who's in charge now. The family can't look weak. The family won't, Vittorio said firmly. I'll find the bastard who did this, and they'll pay in blood. Marco raised an eyebrow, his weathered face unreadable. Big words, kid. Hope you can back them up. Vittorio ignored the jab and turned to the desk, rifling through the ledger. Numbers, names, shipments. Nothing unusual for the family's sprawling operations. Drugs, extortion, gambling. But then he saw it. A scrawled note in the margin, in the Don's shaky handwriting. Trust no one. The snake is near. His pulse quickened. A warning. But from whom and about whom? Isabella approached, her eyes red. Vic, what do we do? If this gets out, we're finished. We keep it quiet, he said, closing the ledger. For now, we trust no one outside this room. Enzo, get the cleaners in here. Make it look like a heart attack until we know more. As Enzo slipped out, Vittorio studied the faces around him. Luca's smirk, Marco's unease, Isabella's fear. Each hid something. The Don's empire was built on loyalty, but it was sustained by secrets. And now, one of those secrets had turned deadly. The clock struck midnight, its chime echoing through the estate. Vittorio knew the night was just beginning. The killer was close. Too close. and he'd have to unravel the family's tangled web of lies to find them. But where to start? The cleaners arrived within the hour, a discreet trio of men in black suits who moved like shadows. Vittorio watched them work, transforming the grisly scene into something mundane. A Don felled by a heart attack slumped over his desk mid-sentence. No bullet hole, no blood, just a glass of bourbon tipped over for effect. By dawn, the story would hold, at least long enough to buy him time. But time was a luxury he couldn't afford to waste. The family dispersed to their corners of the estate, a sprawling mansion in upstate New York ringed by armed guards and dense forest. Vittorio retreated to the Don's private study, a smaller room adjacent to the office, its walls lined with books and a safe hidden behind a portrait of his grandfather. He poured himself a scotch and sat in the leather chair, the ledger open before him. Trust no one. The snake is near. The words gnawed at him. His father had enemies, sure, but this felt personal, familial. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enzo stepped in, his broad frame filling the doorway. "It's done, boss." Words out the Don passed in his sleep. "The capos are restless, though. They want to sit down." "They'll get one," Vittorio said, swirling his drink. "Tomorrow. First, I need you to dig into something. Check the security logs, cameras, gate records, everything. If this was an outsider, they left a trail." Enzo nodded. "And if it wasn't? Then we've got a bigger problem." Vittorio set the glass down. "Start with Luca. He's been too smug tonight. You think he'd kill his own father?" Enzo's tone was skeptical, but his eyes betrayed no judgment. "I think he'd kill anyone who stood between him and power," Vittorio replied. "He's been cozying up to the Petrovs lately, small deals, nothing big enough to raise flags. Until now." Enzo grunted and left, leaving Vittorio alone with his suspicions. Luca had always craved the throne, but murder, it was bold even for him. Then there was Isabella, fragile, devout, but cleverer than she let on. And Uncle Marco, the Don's consigliere, who'd seen every dirty trick in the book. Any of them could be the snake. He opened the safe, keying in the code he'd memorized years ago, 19-25-47, the year the Moretti family took over Brooklyn. Inside were stacks of cash, a revolver, and a leather-bound journal. Vittorio flipped through it. Dates, cryptic notes, payments. One entry dated 2 weeks ago caught his eye. M. Met with R. 50K. Loyalty in question. M could be Marco. R? The Petrov's boss, Roman? A bribe to flip a loyalist, or something worse? Before he could process it, the door creaked open. Isabella slipped in, her silk robe trailing behind her. "Vic, we need to talk." He closed the journal, keeping his expression neutral. "About what?" "About Luca," she said, twisting her rosary. "He's been strange. Last week, I overheard him on the phone saying something about taking care of it soon. I didn't think much of it until tonight." Vittorio leaned forward. "Who was he talking to?" "I don't know." The line was muffled. "But he was angry," said whoever it was owed him. She hesitated. "Vic, what if he—" "Don't jump to conclusions," he said, though his mind was already there. "We need proof. Keep your ears open, but don't confront him." She nodded, tears welling up. "I just want this family to survive." "So do I," he said, though survival felt like a distant hope. After she left, Vittorio paced the room. The journal, Isabella's tip, the ledger's warning. Pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. He needed more. He grabbed his coat and headed to the garage, where his black Maserati waited. If Luca was plotting with the Petrovs, there'd be evidence somewhere, maybe at his apartment in the city. The drive was tense, the night cloaking the roads in silence. Vittorio reached Luca's penthouse by 2 a.m., using a spare key to slip inside. The place reeked of cologne and whiskey. He rifled through drawers, finding nothing but receipts and junk until he hit the bedroom. Under the mattress, a burner phone. He powered it on, scrolling through texts. One, from an unknown number, read, "It's set for the 12th. Payment after." Yesterday. His blood ran cold. Proof? Maybe. But of what exactly? Headlights flashed through the window. Someone was pulling up. Vittorio pocketed the phone and slipped out the back, heart pounding. Back in his car, he replayed the night. The Don's death, the note, Luca's moves. Everything pointed to a betrayal deeper than he'd imagined. But who held the strings? Vittorio sped back to the estate, the burner phone burning a hole in his pocket. The text, "It's set for the 12th, payment after," echoed in his mind. March 12th was yesterday, the day the Don died. Coincidence? Not in this family. The question was who Luca had been texting. An accomplice? A hired gun? Or someone pulling his strings? Vittorio's grip tightened on the wheel. He'd find out, even if it meant tearing the Moretti empire apart brick by brick. The estate loomed ahead, its lights dim against the pre-dawn sky. He parked in the shadows and slipped inside through a side entrance, avoiding the guards. The study was as he'd left it, scotch glass on the table, journal beside it. He pulled out the burner phone and dialed the unknown number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Yeah." Vittorio kept his tone low, mimicking Luca's casual drawl. "It's me. We need to talk." A pause. "You sound off, Luca. Everything go smooth?" "Smooth enough," Vittorio said, fishing. "Just tying up loose ends. You got the payment ready?" "Ready when you deliver proof. Meet me at the docks, Pier 17, tomorrow night. 11 p.m. Don't screw this up." The line went dead. Vittorio stared at the phone. Proof? Proof of the Don's death? Or something else? The docks were Petrov territory. Roman Petrov's crew ran shipments there. If Luca was meeting them, it tied him to the rival family. But why? To seize power? To sell out the Morettis? He needed more than a hunch. He opened the journal again, flipping to the entry. Met with our 50K. Loyalty in question. Marco and Roman? Or a misdirection? He cross-checked the ledger. Shipments to the docks had spiked recently, signed off by Marco. Too many threads, too little time. He needed Enzo. He found his enforcer in the basement gym, lifting weights despite the hour. Enzo dropped the barbell with a clang when Vittorio entered. "Boss, you look like hell." "Feel like it too," Vittorio said, tossing him the burner phone. "Found this at Luca's. He's meeting someone at Pier 17 tomorrow night. Sounds like a payoff for the hit." Enzo scrolled through the texts, frowning. "Luca's ballsy, I'll give him that." "You sure it's him?" "Not yet. Tail him tomorrow. See where he goes, who he talks to. If he's dirty, I want proof before I move." "And if he's clean?" Enzo asked, cracking his knuckles. "Then we've got a ghost in the house." Vittorio rubbed his temples. "Check the security logs yet?" "Yeah. Cameras were down from 9 to 10 p.m. Power glitch, they say. 8 logs show no one in or out after 8. If it was an outsider, they're a damn ninja. Or someone killed the cameras," Vittorio muttered. An inside job felt more certain by the minute. He returned to the study, exhaustion gnawing at him, but sleep wasn't an option. The sit-down with the capos was hours away, and he needed leverage. He called Isabella next, waking her from a fitful sleep. She met him in the kitchen, her eyes puffy. "Vic, what's wrong?" "Luca," he said, keeping his voice low. "That call you heard. Anything else stick out?" She bit her lip. "He mentioned the old man. Said he was too stubborn to see the future. I thought he meant Dad's stubbornness about retiring, but now..." Vittorio's stomach twisted. The Don had resisted change. New alliances, tech upgrades, even Luca's push to expand into cybercrime. Had that resistance gotten him killed? "Keep this between us," he told her. "And watch Marco too. He's been too quiet." She nodded, clutching her coffee. "Vic, be careful. Whoever did this, they're not done." "I know," he said grimly. The sit-down came at noon, held in the estate's dining hall. Capos lined the table, their faces a mix of grief and greed. Marco took the head, acting as interim boss until Vittorio was confirmed. Luca slouched in his seat, picking at his nails, while Isabella sat silently, eyes darting between them. "We've got a void to fill," Marco began, his voice booming. "The Don's gone, and the vultures are circling. Vittorio, you've got big shoes to step into. You ready?" "I am," Vittorio said, standing. "But first, we've got a traitor to root out. Someone in this room knows more than they're saying." The table erupted, shouts, curses, denials. Luca laughed. "Paranoid already, Vic? Dad's death's got you jumping at shadows." "Shadows don't shoot bullets," Vittorio snapped, slamming the ledger down. "This says plenty. Deal's gone sour, money missing. Who's been skimming?" I shifted. Marco cleared his throat. "That's a bold accusation, kid. You got names." Not yet, Vittorio lied, watching their reactions. Luca smirked. Marco fidgeted. A capo named Sal paled. Clues, but no confession. The meeting ended in chaos, alliances fracturing. Vittorio left with more questions than answers, the docks meeting his next move. The snake was near, too near, and he was running out of time to strike. The wind off the Hudson was sharp, carrying the tang of salt and diesel as Vittorio crouched behind a rusted shipping container at Pier 17. The docks were a maze of crates and cranes bathed in the sickly glow of sodium lights. It was 10:45 p.m. and the meeting Luca had set was minutes away. Vittorio adjusted the silencer on his Beretta, the weight of it grounding him. Enzo was in position 100 yards off, binoculars trained on the pier. If this went south, they'd handle it quietly. He'd spent the day piecing it together. The burner phone, the journal's cryptic M, met with R, Isabella's eavesdropping, everything pointed to Luca cutting a deal with the Petrovs. But why kill the Don? Power was the obvious answer, yet Luca lacked the patience for a long game. Someone else was steering this, and Vittorio intended to find out who. A black SUV rolled up, tires crunching gravel. Luca stepped out, his leather jacket catching the light. He lit a cigarette, pacing, his casual swagger masking nerves. Vittorio's pulse quickened. Then another vehicle, a sleek Mercedes, pulled in. Roman Petrov emerged, flanked by two goons, his silver hair gleaming like a beacon. The Russian boss was a shark, all smiles and sharp edges, and his presence here confirmed the worst. "Luca," Roman called, voice smooth as vodka. "You've got balls, calling me out after last night." "It's done, isn't it?" Luca replied, exhaling smoke. "You wanted proof, here it is." He tossed a small envelope. Roman opened it, pulling out a photo, blurry, but Vittorio recognized the Don's office, blood on the desk. Roman chuckled. "Clean work. Your old man never saw it coming." "Had to be done," Luca said, voice tight. "He was holding us back. You get the docks, I get the family. Deal's a deal." Vittorio's blood boiled. Luca had sold them out, traded the Don's life for a slice of Petrov turf. But something nagged at him. Luca wasn't this smooth. Roman pocketed the photo. "Payments in the car. 50 grand as agreed. But I hear Vittorio sniffing around. He a problem." "I'll handle him," Luca said, smirking. "He's too busy playing detective to see the knife coming." Vittorio tightened his grip on the gun. He could end this now, 2 shots, Luca and Roman down, clean and quick. But that left the puppet master. He held back, watching as Roman handed Luca a duffel bag. The deal sealed, they parted, Roman to his Mercedes, Luca to his SUV. Vittorio signaled Enzo via earpiece. "Follow Roman. I've got Luca." He tailed his brother through the city, keeping distance as Luca wove through traffic. The SUV stopped at a dive bar in Queens, a Moretti haunt. Luca went inside, duffel in hand. Vittorio parked and slipped in through the back, sticking to the shadows. The place stank of beer and sweat, a jukebox blaring Sinatra. Luca sat at a corner booth, Marco across from him. Vittorio froze. "Uncle Marco here, now?" He edged closer, straining to hear over the noise. "Petrov's happy," Luca said, sliding the duffel across. "Your cut's in there." Marco unzipped it, counting stacks. "Good. You did well, kid. Antonio was a dinosaur, time for new blood." "You sure Vic won't figure it?" Luca asked, lighting another cigarette. "He's smart, but not that smart," Marco said, smirking. "He'll chase ghosts till we bury him." Vittorio's vision blurred with rage. Marco, family consigliere, the Don's right hand, had orchestrated it all. Luca was the trigger, but Marco was the brain. The journal's wasn't a guess anymore. 50 grand to betray decades of loyalty. He wanted to storm over, put a bullet in both, but evidence was thin, words, not proof. He needed them caught red-handed. He slipped out, mind racing. Back at the estate, he found Isabella in the chapel, praying. "It's Marco," he whispered, pulling her aside. "He's behind it, with Luca." Her eyes widened. "Marco? But he's family." "Family kills family," Vittorio said bitterly. "They're splitting the empire with the Petrovs. I need you to play dumb, get Marco talking. Can you do that?" She nodded, trembling. "For Dad, yes." "Good. Tomorrow we set a trap. They think I'm blind. I'll let them dig their graves." He left her and locked himself in the study, replaying the night. Marco's betrayal cut deepest. Not just the Don, but the legacy. The sit-down tomorrow would be a powder keg. He had one shot to expose them, or the Morettis were finished. The estate buzzed with tension as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. Vittorio stood at the study window, watching the Capos cars roll in for the emergency sit-down. Tonight, he'd unmask Marco and Luca or die trying. The burner phone, the journal, Isabella's testimony. It wasn't airtight, but it was enough to sow doubt. Doubt was a weapon in a family built on trust. He'd briefed Enzo at dawn, the big man's loyalty unshaken. "We play it tight," Vittorio had said. "Marco's got ears everywhere. One slip and we're done." Enzo was stationed in the dining hall now, wired with a hidden mic, ready to record every word. Isabella was the wild card. Her job was to bait Marco, draw out a confession. If she faltered, the plan crumbled. Vittorio adjusted his tie, the Don's silver cufflinks glinting on his wrists. A silent vow to finish this. He tucked the beretta into his waistband and headed downstairs. The dining hall was packed, capos and lieutenants crammed around the table, their faces a mix of suspicion and fatigue. Marco sat at the head, Luca to his right, both exuding confidence. Isabella lingered near the back, pale but resolute. Marco banged a gavel, a relic from the Don's early days. "Order, damn it. We're here to settle leadership. Vittorio, you've got the floor." Vittorio stepped forward, his voice steady. "The Don's death wasn't natural. We've got a killer in this room, and I'm not taking the chair until they're exposed." Murmurs erupted. Luca rolled his eyes. "Here we go again. You got proof, or just hot air?" "Plenty," Vittorio said, tossing the ledger onto the table. "Missing cash, secret deals. Someone's been bleeding us dry. Then there's this." He held up the burner phone. "Found it at Luca's. Texts about a hit, dated the 12th. Sound familiar?" Luca's smirk faltered, but Marco cut in. "Phones can be planted, Vittorio. You're grasping." "Am I?" Vittorio turned to Isabella. "Sis, tell them what you heard." She stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "Last week, Luca was on a call. Said the old man had to go. Then last night, I overheard Marco talking to him about splitting the take. They laughed about Dad being gone." The room exploded, shouts, accusations. Marco's face darkened. "That's a lie, girl. You're grieving, not thinking straight." "Am I?" Isabella pressed, tears in her eyes. "You told Luca Antonio was a dinosaur. I heard it, uncle. You wanted him dead." Luca slammed the table. "She's delusional. Vic's feeding her this crap to frame us." Vittorio kept his cool. "Then explain the docs. I saw you meet Roman Petrov, Luca. Handed him proof of the hit, took 50 grand. Marco's cut was in the bag." The capos turned on Marco, voices rising. Sal, a wiry veteran, stood. "You dealing with the Russians, Marco? After all we fought for?" "It's nonsense," Marco roared, but sweat beaded on his brow. "Vittorio's staging a coup." "Then let's hear it," Vittorio said, nodding to Enzo. The enforcer hit play on the mic feed, a crackling recording of Marco at the bar. "Antonio was a dinosaur. Time for new blood." Gasps filled the room. Luca lunged for the device, but Enzo pinned him. "You son of a..." Luca snarled, struggling. Marco stood, face red. "You've got nothing solid. Words, not evidence. Then why's your name in the Don's journal?" Vittorio opened it, reading aloud. "M. Met with R. 50K. Loyalty in question." He faced the capos. "Marco sold us to the Petrovs. Luca pulled the trigger. They betrayed blood." The room split, half shouting for justice, half defending Marco's decades of service. Sal drew a gun, aiming at Luca. "Talk, you bastard, or I'll end this now." "Enough," Marco bellowed, pulling his own piece. "Anyone moves, they're dead." Chaos reigned, guns drawn, loyalties fracturing. Vittorio saw his chance. "Enzo, now." The enforcer tackled Marco, wresting the gun free. Vittorio grabbed Luca, slamming him against the wall. "Who else is in on it? Talk." Luca spat blood, grinning. "You're too late, Vic. The Petrovs are coming tonight. You're finished." Vittorio's heart sank. A double cross. He turned to the capos. We're under attack. Arm up now. As men scrambled, headlights flared outside. Tires screeching, engines roaring. The Petrovs weren't waiting. Marco laughed from the floor. You wanted the throne, kid? Enjoy the war. Gunfire erupted, glass shattering. Vittorio dragged Luca to cover, mind racing. The trap had worked too well. Now survival was the game. The dining hall became a battlefield in seconds. Bullets tore through the windows, splintering wood and flesh as the Petrovs' men stormed the estate. Vittorio crouched behind an overturned table, Luca pinned beneath his knee, the traitor's grin replaced by panic. Shouts and gunfire drowned out the chaos of the capos scrambling for cover or returning fire. Enzo dragged Marco to a corner, the old man's defiance crumbling as bullets whizzed past. Isabella huddled near the fireplace, clutching a candlestick like a weapon. Call them off, Vittorio snarled, pressing his beretta to Luca's temple. Now. They won't stop, Luca gasped, blood trickling from his lip. Roman wants it all, docs, cash, us. You're dead, Vic. Vittorio's mind raced. The Petrovs weren't just here for a power grab, they meant to erase the Morettis entirely. Marco's betrayal had opened the door and Luca's greed had lit the fuse. He yanked Luca up, using him as a shield, and shouted to Enzo. Get the capos to the armory. We hold the line. Enzo nodded, barking orders. The loyalists, Sal, a few others rallied, grabbing weapons from a hidden cache under the floorboards. The Petrovs breached the hall, a dozen men in black, led by Roman himself, his silver hair stark against the smoke. Vittorio fired, dropping two, but the odds were grim. Vittorio, Roman's voice cut through the din, smooth and mocking. Surrender, and I might spare the girl. Isabella whimpered, but Vittorio ignored the bait. He dragged Luca toward the study, bullets pinging around them. Inside, he shoved his brother into a chair and locked the door. Last chance, Luca? Who else knew? Luca laughed, a broken sound. Just Marco. He planned it, fed me the lines, set the meat. Said we'd rule together. Idiot trusted the Russians. Vittorio's gut twisted. Marco, the snake, had played them all. He grabbed the journal, shoving it in Luca's face. This ends tonight. You're confessing on record. The door shuddered, Petrov's men ramming it. Vittorio hit record on his phone. Talk. Luca glared, then spoke, voice low. Marco wanted Dad out. Said he'd cut a deal with Roman, half our turf for a clean hit. I shot him. Marco gave me the gun. The door burst open and Vittorio spun, firing. A Petrov thug fell, but another tackled him. Luca bolted, only to take a stray bullet to the chest, collapsing with a gurgle. Vittorio wrestled free, shooting his attacker point blank. The study was a slaughterhouse, blood, bodies, betrayal. He staggered into the hall. Enzo and Sal held the line, but bodies littered the floor, capos, Petrovs, no distinction. Marco knelt, hands up, Roman's gun to his head. Isabella stood nearby, trembling but alive. Enough. Vittorio roared, stepping forward, gun raised. Roman, this stops now. The Russian smirked. You're outgunned, Moretti. Marco's deal's done. You've got nothing. I've got this, Vittorio said, holding up the phone. Luca's confession, Marco's too, if he talks. Feds get it, you're all finished. Roman's smile faded. Marco paled. He's bluffing, the old man rasped. Try me, Vittorio said, finger on the trigger. One call and your empire's ash. A tense beat. Then Roman lowered his gun. Smart play, kid. We walk, this stays quiet. No, Vittorio said coldly. Marco stays. You leave, or I pull the trigger. Roman waited, then nodded. Deal. He signaled his men, retreating through the shattered doors, leaving silence and carnage. Vittorio turned to Marco, who glared defiantly. You'll never hold this family, boy. Watch me, Vittorio said, nodding to Enzo. The enforcer hauled Marco up, zip-tying his wrists. Lock him in the basement. Trials tomorrow, family rules. The capos gathered, battered but alive. Sal clapped Vittorio's shoulder. You're the Don now, Vic. What's next? Vittorio looked at Isabella, then the ruins around them. We rebuild. Clean house. No more snakes. By morning, the estate smoldered, but the Moretti stood. Marco faced the capos, confessed under duress, every detail of his plot with Roman, Luca's role, the greed that undid them. The vote was unanimous, death by family tradition. Enzo carried it out, a single shot in the woods. Vittorio took the Don's chair, the ledger before him, Isabella at his side. The empire was bruised, but his. The snake was dead, the betrayal buried. Bloodlines had been tested and redefined.